Hey guys, this is Christopher Armstrong. Just wanting to give you guys all a quick announcement and an update on what the campaign is looking like. If you haven't logged in recently, you can check the screen here. So we are just shy of 34 grand, which is well above our target range or our stretch goal of 32 grand, which was to allow for the United States production. So I'm super excited about that. I've talked with my manufacturer. Right now we're setting up the logistics with how that's going to get done. There are some concerns when it comes to the social distancing restrictions that are still in place in California. They have a plant over here. So we're probably going to get it done in the Midwest. They have another plant over there. So right now I'm still working with them on that. But from now until then, I'm just going to have to be in Zen monk mode on tightening up the manuscript and sending everything out for quality control. So this is going to be the last such update that I'm able to make like this, which is an actual video. But I want to kind of do something that was cool kind of in the time being. So to just show my appreciation for all of you guys, because you guys rock. Like if I didn't have the over 600 backers, then this project would have never even been successful, or it would have never even been a reality. So I'm beyond grateful for all of you. You guys are awesome. So here's a few things that I wanted to share that are near and dear to my heart. This is one of my original. You could kind of say this is where the book started. I was really proud of this Schwinn bike that I got at the time because I was geeking out on the chromoly steel that it was made of. But anyway, that's another story. Maybe it's the same story. But this was a book that I had back in the day. I was about 18, 19 years old in my parents' garage at home, just playing around with molding and casting. I would watch the behind the scenes of movies like Batman, Terminator 2. Those were my favorite one. James Cameron, Stan Winston Effects Studio, Christopher Nolan. You know, this is the stuff that I looked up to. Like there wasn't really that much creativity or people that were making things in Houston, Texas. So you know, I kind of want to get my hands dirty. And once I did, it was just a gateway drug. Ever since then, I never turned back. So you can kind of see, like at the time, like I just printed these out. This was back in the days when there was no GPS, and you had to print out maps actually on MapQuest. If I don't know if some of you guys are too young to probably actually remember that, but so like what was available online was very crude. It was okay, but it was still crude. You know, there was just the data and the information was just so few and far in between. So, but this is what I did. Like I would just go around as wherever I could find it. There's just some from Smooth On. They had some catalogs and just some different information. So there was a place called Reynolds Advanced Material. It took me an hour to drive out to those guys from my home in Houston at the time. And I was like a kid in a candy store seeing all the foams and being able to touch it and feel it. Like it's a whole different experience if you're looking at it, trying to evaluate supplier and get materials. If you actually go in there in person and feel it and touch it, pick it up, gauge the weight versus just, you know, see it on a screen or in a book or a manual or whatever. But yeah, that's essentially what I had. And this is like a piece of history because I'm holding on to this thing. And then there was a molding casting book, Thurston James at the time. You can see it's just all black and white. Like the images aren't that great. Kind of light on information. You know, it's kind of boring actually. So, you know, the book that I made is full color. It's full bleed, full color. I made sure to have high resolution images of all the equipment, all the technology, so you can see it. It's basically like a classroom in a book. Like I'm kind of wanting to have like an apprenticeship or like a virtual shadow, like in a book form, or just a guide that where you can kind of get your hands dirty or just at least see how to do it legitimately through a book. It's very expensive to do this. It's super expensive to do full color, full bleed, especially with the page count in the new book. But you know, it's something that I'm passionate about, and I am making sure that we get that done the right way. See, here's the tabs on the side. I kind of shared this in a post on the last time. But this is the paperback book. This is what's currently available. This is still about 100 pages short of what the gold edition is going to be. So this is okay, but the gold edition is going to be next level. So a couple other books that really inspired me, or at least I kind of want to bring up. Free to Make. This is by Dale Doherty. He is the person who started the Maker Faire, which is the biggest. It's like the Disneyland of making. If you haven't been to it, I went to one in San Mateo last year in California and blew my mind going there. You just see all this cool stuff going on. So there was a couple of things that I called out here, and this is how I read. I just take notes of everything. So he says here, a leader of a group responsible for engineering education in elementary schools told me that engineers aren't makers. I shook my head, waved a copy of Make at him, which is Dale's magazine, and said that the next generation of engineers are reading this magazine. The guardians of the engineering profession would like us to think of engineers as doctors in a lab coats, not meg-tag repairmen. They would like kids to aspire to join the engineering profession from an early age. They don't like people informally calling themselves engineers without the proper credentials. In fact, there has been an ongoing debate about programmers who call themselves software engineers. The process of makers might be informal, messy, and organic. It's a process that includes but overcomes repeated failures, misunderstandings, and kludges. It's their own process that reflects real life rather than an ideal or model. So basically, like the current education system, learning about theorems, learning about equations, formula, versus getting your hands dirty, learning empirically. James Dyson's a huge proponent about that. He says you learn more through failure than you learn through success. I mean, he built 5,127 prototypes to get to his first bagless dual cyclone vacuum cleaner. And, he's a huge proponent that you learn more from failures than you do from your successes. So there's a huge dichotomy, or there's a huge kind of detachment there from what's being taught in school and what people actually need in the field. Here's another one, Barbarians and Bureaucrats. This is probably one of my favorite business books of all time. It's totally underrated. It was written back in the late 80s. Not a lot of designers or creatives read business books. I think that's a huge mistake, because you're going to have to learn business, at least the scratching the surface, if you want to learn how to make things and deal with production issues. So one of the stories was about a recent college grad at the Honda Motor Corporation, what was known as a Maverick even in Japan. Soichiro Honda was the founder, and he was also the lead engineer. So he's a badass. If you don't know who he is, take a look at him. I wish there was more information about him out there, or at least that I've been able to find. So there was a story of him and a young recent hire as a college graduate. He says, "You stupid," Honda roared. "No wonder the piston gets burned. You have changed the thickness." After the young Ijimari attempted to defend his design change with some data from previous engines, Mr. Honda roared again. "I hate college graduates. They only use their heads. Do you really think you can use obsolete data obtained from old, low-performance engines? I've been making and touching pistons for several tens of years now. I'm fully aware how critical half a millimeter is. A company does not need people like you who only use their heads. Before you laid out this design, why didn't you listen to the opinions of those experienced in the shop? If you think academic study in college is everything, you're totally wrong. You will be useless in Honda unless you spend more time on the spot for many years to come. You will go to the machine shop," Mr. Honda said, or ordered, "and apologize to every person there for wasting their efforts." And then it goes on to say, "He has learned to appreciate specialized competence and avoid alienation induced by complex structure. At Honda, engineers and management spend most of their time at the factory, in touch with their associates, the product, and the process. In traditional management, there is a separation between management, quote unquote, and the actual work. The line is impossible to find at Honda. Managers are working, literally, in the production line. They're studying, measuring, evaluating not the people, but the product. No one appears to view his job as checking up or controlling the work of their subordinates. They are hard on performance, but soft on people. Many less successful companies are hard on people, but soft on performance." So basically, this is why I include, there's been people, there was a high school instructor or teacher in Greece. I think his name is Sartoris. I probably butchered that name. But he made the claim, or he brought up, like, hey, some of these machines are more expensive. Like, a lot of the kids aren't going to have, like, especially the young kids, high school, grade school, or what have you, they're not going to have access to some of these more expensive machines like CNCs and 3D printers, laser cutter. But even if you don't have access to it, one of the things that I feel like is the most important point that I want to get across with this couple of passages that I read from these two books, even if you don't have access to it, learning how they work and why they're important is super important, because in America especially, and other countries also in the developed West nations, we've seen a huge departure or detachment between where goods are made and produced and the actual creative or the knowledge workers that actually do the work. It's more cognitive, it's less hands-on, it's more behind the screens of a computer and emails versus the factories wherever they may be, Asia, supply chains around the world. And, if someone doesn't really know how the production line works, or they don't really get their hands dirty on the production line or with the machinery, or at least, if not to get their hands dirty, to actually appreciate how the machine works, then, there's going to be a huge departure from what they do or design or create and the actual people that make them. And I have a quick story to share. I don't want this to drag on forever, but I used a Juki. It's actually in the book. I expanded upon it in the, so I'm using my colored tabs here. It's for a quick reference, but it's actually in the book. It's expanded upon cut and sew section on the gold edition, but sewing machine. So this was a Juki sewing machine. It's a Japanese. This is probably the most high-end brand of sewing machines. Arc'teryx uses it. Patagonia uses it. All the high-end outdoor companies use the Juki. It's a tried and trusted brand in the world of cut and sew and apparel and fabrics and textiles design development. So I use this machine at Urban Workshop over here in Costa Mesa, and I learned, because I've been working in footwear and soft goods for about 8 years now. And once I never use a sewing machine. You know, I learned how to put together tech packs. I learned how to communicate with the factory, how to do emails. But to actually know the parts of the sewing machine, like the walking foot, the needle, where the actual thread goes in, and how difficult it is. Like if you want to do multicolors and you have to switch out the needle every single time. The radius is, like if the cut radius is way too tight or sharp, it makes it super hard for the sewing machine seamstress or operator to actually get in that curve. So then it creates a lot of puckering, which is the wrinkling in the material. So and then it also leads to a lot more failure when in production, because then if they fail, they have to toss it out, and it leads to quality control issues. So, you know, I learned a lot just by taking a quick. Alrighty, the camera cut out, but we're back again. So here's two products that I designed a few years ago. Both these were a few years apart, two entirely separate brands. One for performance racing, another one for performance flight pilots. Leather, suede. I designed these, honestly, I've never even had any experience on a sewing machine at all at the time. I've never even worked my way around a sewing machine. I had a developer work on both. So the development engineer is the direct liaison that communicates with the factory, and they're the ones that know different processes. I knew the basics of it to get me, obviously, to you know, suffice and get a product to market. But here's an example perfectly. So this is another flight cap that I designed for the brand Lift Aviation. And you can see here the puckering. So this is wrinkling that happens on the top. And after having that experience, working my way around a Juki sewing machine, I learned that what's happening here is the curve is too tight, which means it's way too squared off right here. And what I should have done was design it to be more of a soft, subtle radius and a curve. And that would have made it a lot easier for the sewing machine operator to sew. It would have made it a lot easier for the underlining lining material to sew together, and then it would have gotten rid of this puckering completely. So that shows you that once you have experience on machines, you can design. It makes you a better designer. It makes you better at learning how the actual product is actually made. So my parting words are this: learn the tools, respect the process, but don't ever let yourself become trapped because of a lack thereof. At the end of the day, it's your mind and your creativity and your resourcefulness that are the most powerful tools of all. So if you haven't pledged just yet, or you want to upgrade from the paperback to the hardcover expanded edition, there are still a few days to do so. Stay tuned for the book to drop in September, and I'll be working super hard to make sure that it doesn't disappoint. So I know you're all going to love it. Thanks so much again, guys. You guys are all a big part of this. We're all in this together. I couldn't have done it without your support. Take care and bye.